Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Also Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I've got Mac with me. Welcome, Mac.
Good evening.
Tonight we're going to be previewing the quarterfinals of the knockout round from the 2024 Euros, and we'll also touch on the teams that we have seen eliminated from the competition at this point. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys and want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. All right, Mac, let's get started. Of course, we got to go into which round of 16 games surprised us the most. And I'm going to toss it to you first here. Which game do you want to start it off with?
So I don't know if I want to start off positive or do I want to be able to start off negative here, because I think there's so many different ways to potentially go about it. But I think let's be positive today, Ray. You know what? We want to look on the bright side. We want to be happy. We want to start with a smile on our faces before we trash the rest of the trashy teams.
Absolutely.
But to start off positive, let's go with Spain and their 4-1 win against Georgia. And we'll talk about Georgia later on the podcast because we definitely do want to give them the flowers considering how far they made it into the tournament. But Spain, that quality people have been talking about, and there's been a lot of posts about how the combination of Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal have been the two Ferraris on the wing. That's what they've been dubbed on either side. I think if you're looking at a team that's maybe, I wouldn't say surprised us this most, but we went into this tournament having an idea of who the best four teams in the tournament were, with who would, can anyone else enter that conversation? I think for me, thus far in the tournament, Spain have been the best team in that conversation alongside those other four teams, it being Portugal, England, France, and Germany, in terms of who could win this tournament, which leaves us even to a more exciting, it builds up the anticipation even more for what's going to happen this coming Friday when the quarterfinals do start, as we have some killer games. But Spain, for me, again, they were playing against Georgia. The way that they're able to control it, dictate play, Georgia didn't have a shot on target for the entire game. They managed 13 themselves and looked like a consistent threat whenever they got into not just the final third, but even inside Georgia's half, where they had so many different weapons of, this guy can beat their player one-on-one, create for themselves or create for their teammate. To the point where now, even through the tournament, when you're looking at their lineup, a player that was injured going into the tournament, Daniello, if he's back to full fitness as well, that adds another kind of tool into their tool belt of ways that they can get at teams from midfield position and score goals, which even got on the score sheet against Georgia. So for me, they've been the biggest surprise of the tournament, how well they've done and moving themselves into that top echelon. I'm very excited to see what they do in this upcoming game against Germany.
Yeah, going back to, of course, our preview of the actual tournament, Mac, you and I were uncertain about what we would make out of this Spain team and the Spanish team, and we're, of course, like you said, one of the biggest surprises of the tournament, and really a positive surprise, because we thought previous tournaments where they have won, I think they won 2 back-to-back, 2008 and 2012, if I'm not mistaken, with the World Cup in between. A lot of people would say Spain was kind of boring, a lot of possession like they did in this game, but not a lot of final product. But like you said, they have been showing out, scoring a lot of goals. I think probably, I don't have the stats with me right now, but probably the team that has scored the most goals this tournament without having to look at it. And if you are a casual football fan, or even if you're not a football fan, you're just watching the Euros, you're probably thinking, wow, Spain is probably the favorite to win it. Which, I mean, at this point, it's still, we probably give them a good chance, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily favorites. But to give them their credit, they have been performing quite well. Lamine Yamal and Nico Williams, you already highlighted them. But of course, I want to do highlight even the midfield three of Pedri, Rodri, and Fabian Ruiz, who have been a constant. And you have Rodri in that team. It will elevate the floor of any team with his ability. So that being said, it does look like maybe at the beginning of the tournament or even previous to the tournament starting, we would have looked at that team and said, okay, well, you have Rodri, you have a player like Dani Carvajal, Laporte, a veteran in Morata, but you also have a lot of younger players that you're not sure what to make out of. But of course, this is coming through now, and like you said, Danny Olmo coming on and getting on the score sheet is great for them moving forward. Getting a comprehensive win, the biggest one I think, apart from the Netherlands in the round of 16. They're definitely going to be liking their chances going forward, whoever they face, and we'll of course touch on that a little bit. So great shout there. If you don't have anything to add, I did want to move on then to one game that surprised me, and honestly, of course, I have to pat ourselves in the back. We got one prediction wrong, a very, very surprise, one that we were kind of flipping and flopping, I would say, previous to this, but one that I want to give you credit for sure, because you pushed my hand on this, was Switzerland against Italy. And Switzerland is here to ball out. They look like I've used this term over time and time again. They just look like a seasoned veteran team that knows what they're doing, knows what the goal is, come here, execute it, go home, prepare for the next game. They're like a machine, and it really showed out against Italy, where at this time Italy was very much like Spain, I would say, Mac, where we didn't know what they're gonna come to the tournament with. Of course, they were the holders, but there were a lot of changeover. There was a lot of changeover in the players there, and so we didn't really know. And I think themselves, they don't have a identity in this game, which Switzerland took advantage of. Even though Italy had long spells of possession, Switzerland made their chances count. Furler in the first half with a great run, and then Vargas with a fantastic finish past a towering Donnarumma. Gotta give Switzerland credit, and of course, our boy Granit Xhaka balling out there. So Switzerland, very, very impressive, even though it was only a 2-0 win. I think very impressive overall. What are your thoughts on that result, Mac?
I completely agree. In terms of how Switzerland were, it felt like most of the game was played in the middle area of the pitch, and Switzerland did such a fantastic job of winning their one-on-one battles. Again, possession was even, but once they got into the final third, that's really where you saw the separation for Switzerland, in my opinion. Where Italy, it felt like when they were trying to create opportunities, it was more slower pace against a set defense. Where Switzerland, when they're playing with three center halves, two wing backs, and Xhaka and Fuller in the midfield, Italy found it very difficult to be able to break through the lines. I think that's a large part because Scamacca, even though he's had good seasons, he has 4 seasons, I don't think he's a natural creator as a number 9. We're going to drop in and show against 3 center backs, and he's not as much of a threat getting in behind. So as long as you kind of manage the balls in transition, and they did a fantastic job of that. Chiesa wasn't really much of an impact for me. Barella, who I would argue has the most fanfare in the Italian midfield, he wasn't too much of a threat, wasn't really creative. So it's weird to say, but they were missing that creative sense to be able to break the lines down of Switzerland, to then even get into the final third to create opportunities to get shots on net. Through the game, they only had 1 shot on target, so that was very, very poor. Where Switzerland, it felt like, for me, every single time they did get into the final third, it felt like they had kind of the wind in their sails in a lot of ways, where they felt like you could believe that they could take their player one-on-one, they could take them out wide, they could play 1-2 in the middle to be able to create opportunities for themselves or their teammates. So for me, that was the separator, where Switzerland had been more of a consistent threat in front of goal, creating opportunities thus far in this tournament, which is why I leaned heavily towards them going into this game. It seems like it played out that way. The only downside, I guess, we didn't necessarily get, at least selfishly on me, which would have been lovely if I called it, was a Shaqiri goal, or even him on the pitch. They didn't even need him at those moments. And I understand he's not been the regular one of their players, but Breel Mbolo, it seems like, for me, and something we may talk about shortly, it seems like he still hasn't hit full stride thus far in this tournament. And I think he has it in it, where he has that pace, he has the technical ability, which I think in a game against England in their next matchup, as we transition to talk about some of the other teams that maybe got through but didn't play so well, for me, I think he can be a critical player for them, where in that game, they're not going to have as much possession as they did in the Italian game. But when they do, I think that they have the capabilities, they have the tools to be able to get at an England defense, which I would argue hasn't been tested too much, has looked strong thus far. But Switzerland, for me, they're very much still a dangerous team. Again, I would still lean England just so you look on natural quality. But Switzerland, for me, would I be surprised if they beat them? No, because for me right now, this team, how well they're playing defensively, and how poor England have been offensively, with Switzerland having the right players to get at them like Ndoye, Reader, Vargas, and Bolo, like I said, to get at an England defense in transition. I think they could be very successful. So, great credit to Switzerland, and I think they're a dangerous team against England. But now I want to go negative. Let's go negative.
Let's go. Of
Let's
course.
go negative. Again, I want to throw stink on England. England have been hot dog water, absolute trash. In the offensive end, I think defensively they've been fine. They haven't made too many mistakes. I think they've conceded 2 goals thus far this tournament. And one was a fantastic goal off Denmark, which that can't happen. And again, the goal against Slovenia, Slovakia, sorry, that can happen. But offensively has definitely been the issue. Jude Bellingham scored a roll goal, and Harry Kane scored a couple minutes extra time, which really put them through. But for me, the team that's been the most disappointing is not them. It's been France. I think there's not a shadow of doubt. They haven't scored a goal from open play thus far this tournament. And going into a game where they're facing Portugal, which, if you ask me pre-tournament, I think we picked Portugal to go through. But if you were to tie me down and then give me true serum, which team is better, I would say France. And I don't think there would be too much debate about that. But thus far this tournament, for me, they have been the most disappointing, where Mbappe really hasn't gotten going. I understand he broke his nose. That may be tough. Dembele's been off injured. Marcus Thuram has been absolutely horrendous. Probably in terms of what we've seen from club level transition to international football this Euros, I think he's maybe the biggest downgrade we've seen in player quality going from club to international level. I think if they didn't have world-class defenders lined up, thinking through their team, this team would be in huge trouble. But they do have that, and that's what's carried them through thus far. But for me, I think in terms of, if we're going negative, and if we're going to throw if we're going to throw blame around, the team that's been the most disappointing to me thus far is France, and then secondarily would be England. What are your thoughts on that?
They are very much neck and neck. Of course, with both of them going into the tournament being tournament favorites, we expected at least a 3-0 win by each team here and there. But it's been really the opposite, where both front lines are just misfiring, it looks like. Definitely on actually both sides, like you said, I can't even pick out a real positive, because it's been moments that have won them the games. The goal, I think it's given as an own goal for Jan Vertonghen, but Kolomwani, of course, doing all the work to really get that moment to get the goal. Apart from that, though, the Belgium-France game, it just looked like two teams that did not want to lose. And it was, here, you have a chance to attack us where we're set defensively, and then the other team would try to do the same. And really, nothing stood out until that final goal in the 85th minute, if I'm not mistaken, between France and Belgium. And so, yeah, like you said, both teams, England and France, have a good spine defensively. They should be good and set up to battle any team that they face. But yeah, if they don't start scoring, of course, in the next game, where it's coming to, of course, the actual final rounds of this tournament, it's going to be tough. And then likely we're going to have to see some extra time added, maybe even penalties. And of course, that's the most heartbreaking way to go out. So both teams, I just think, have been equally as disappointing. Though, if you still give me the odds, I would still lean to have both these teams reaching the finals respectively. So I guess I'll quickly read out the remaining the remaining results match, so that it tees up our quarterfinals, and we can just go ahead and predict some of those results. Of course, Germany, the tournament hosts, beat Denmark 2-0. You already touched on England beating Slovakia 2-1. France beat Belgium 1-0, as I just mentioned. Portugal and Slovenia tied 0-0, but of course Portugal won in penalties. Netherlands won 3-0 against Romania, and Turkey beat Austria in a very, very tight game, 2-1. So that leaves us, Mac, with the quarterfinals of England, Switzerland, Netherlands, Turkey, Spain, Germany, Portugal, France. So I guess we'll go straight into previewing some of these. We already talked a little bit about England, Switzerland. Do we want to go back to this and sort of flesh out the remaining predictions for this tie?
I don't think so. I'm gonna stick with our last broadcast prediction of who's going to
Right.
come out. Again, I think this might be one of the first teams where we may see a team try to play in the middle of the pitch against England, which may give them more space to create opportunities for themselves. So they might get an easier path, which opens up their offense. So for me, I lean England in this game. Still, no changes there. What about for you?
Yeah. I'm overall, of course, I do have to lean towards England based on the quality of both sides. However, I think it's just rumors that are circulating, but there is a possibility, maybe slight chance that England try to match Switzerland with a back three and five in midfield. That is not the worst shout considering what we've seen from this England side. I don't think it'll happen, but it'll be interesting to see how that matches up. So very much looking forward to that one. Let's move on then, I guess, to Turkey, Netherlands. Mac, we expected, I think, Austria to make it to this game, to this tie. Unfortunately for them, Turkey, of course, came up through that tie, and Netherlands, of course, won their game against Romania as we expected it. This one is tough, but again, based on sort of the quality from these two sides, I do have to lean the Netherlands overall. Cody Gakpo, of course, putting the Netherlands in front against Romania, and then of course getting an assist, and I think Danya Malen getting the last two goals for the Netherlands. So they created some separation between themselves and Romania, and although they haven't been as convincing in the group stages, I think Netherlands have that extra gear to go to. So I think I take them slightly over Turkey, but a very much open game I think could happen. What are your thoughts there, Mac?
The odds heavily favor Netherlands here. I think if you were to ask me which is the most lopsided matchup between any of these quarterfinal games, it would be these two teams, which I don't think is too much of a difference if you look at the disparity. It's just how even a lot of these matchups are. But Netherlands, for me, has that quality. I think their midfield is still the weakest part with the injury of Frankie de Jong not being part of this tournament. For me, that's probably one of the most vital misses of any individual team, missing one of their key players on an area of the pitch where they are the weakest, right? So I think if Turkey are able to wrestle control of that midfield and make it very difficult for Netherlands to get out of their move the ball from what they have in the middle of the pitch into the final third and clog it up where you're not getting players in one-on-one positions like Cody Gakpo, Memphis Depay, Xavi Simons in the final third. If you can kind of deny the areas that them getting into areas pitch of one-on-one situations, I think that's their best way for success. It's going to be very, very difficult because that team is full of quality. So that's why for me, I think any matchup, I would be the most surprised if Turkey actually go on and beat Netherlands. And that would be the biggest upset across these quarterfinals in any given matchup for me.
Yeah, maybe a couple of years ago, people took Turkey as the dark horses. They're going to be very much the dark horse team, I think, to make it to the finals at this stage. So the Netherlands, we predict to go through there. So that leaves us with a England-Netherlands semifinal. Let's move on then, Mac, I think, to easily the tougher side of the bracket. Spain, Germany, the most convincing team against the hosts. This one is a very, very tight affair here, Mac. I think in our previous podcast, we had Germany to go through, if I'm not mistaken. I do want to stick with that just because Spain, even though they had been scoring a lot, Germany, I feel, have the quality to match them up in terms of midfield. And then if they do stink up the game, I think Germany have what it takes with their individual quality to get a goal as opposed to Spain, who have high-flying wingers, but if Morata, as we expect, is not scoring. So far, he's shown that in tournaments. And if you're Germany, you're able to clamp down the two very, very bright wingers from Spain. I think Germany have enough to go through with their quality and their specific attacking threat in Jamal Musiala and either Leroy Sané or Florian Wirtz. Of course, Sané playing in the last game and Wirtz being dropped. So what are your thoughts there, Mac? Do you still stick with Germany at this point?
So before I answer that, I want to ask you, over under odds on one of us calling in sick to work on Friday. What do we do here? I'll be
Listen,
transparent with you. I'm not. I'm working from home. Definitely was going to manage to figure that out as soon as possible. But am I going to get a lot of work done? Probably not. Let's keep it a buck.
absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And also the Canada game at night. We got some big games Friday. Eh?
It's definitely going to be tough.
But no, going for Spain, Germany. I think one point you just kind of ended up on the Leroy Sané situation. For me, he was piss poor against Denmark. So I'd be shocked if he starts. I would think that we'll likely see Florian Wirtz come back on into the starting lineup. What does that mean for Germany? I think the question will be is who's really going to dominate this midfield here? Because Germany thus far, what they've done against every single team that they played for, they're, I'd say, the most talked about, not most talked about player, that may not be fair to say, but in possession, their most useful player, the most used player in terms of passes completed has been Toni Kroos, where he sits really as a left center back position alongside Schlotterbeck in the last game and Rudiger. Before that, it was Jonathan Tah, who will be back into this game, where he was able to take possession. If Spain's able to wrest control, then does that put Germany on the back foot, where how they've scored most of their goals by being very metronomic in midfield, getting players like Musiala, Florian Wirtz, Gundogan either in between the defense and midfield, or making runs deeper into the lines. That there'll be fewer opportunities to get into that, which then they're scoring in different ways we haven't seen them do thus far this tournament. Whereas Spain, we know what they want to be able to do is where they want to be able to get Rodri, Pedri on the ball, circulate that ball, and then as soon as they can find a player, either Nico Williams or Lamine Yamal on either wing isolated, they want to get at them. So for me, it's going to be who can wrestle control of the midfield and dominate that area of the pitch more in their manner and get their best players in positions that they feel comfortable in. And of course, like I said, that'll be Lamine Yamal, Nico Williams against either Kimmich or Rum. I think they'll be comfortable in both of those matchups individually, as well as Musiala going against, in all likelihood, a Carvajal or maybe and Florian Wirtz on their side dealing with Cucurella. So for me, that there is the matchup: is how well the midfield can kind of dominate their style of play onto the pitch and bring their best players to go at the weakest areas of the pitch of the other team. So for me, I agree with you. I want to lean Germany because that's what our pre-tournament pick was. But for me, I think this is the one. If you're asking me if I'm a betting man, this is the stay away. This is a stereotypical flip of the coin. Even though Germany's were the least talked about in terms of results, because they very much just did what we expected. Scored 2 goals, one off a penalty from Kai Havertz. Didn't shell out like Spain, but didn't kind of come down, crash into earth like either France, Portugal, England, right? So for me, I still lean Germany because of that. We've seen them do enough, but I would not be surprised if either of these teams win.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one, and of course, the game that follows that afternoon will be Portugal versus France. And in keeping with sort of our predictions in our previous podcast, we haven't really learned much from France that would tell us otherwise. Again, I wouldn't bet. This, of course, would be the other game that I wouldn't really bet on because anything could happen with the quality on the pitch. And of course, that pitch is going to be littered with quality from both the Portuguese and the French sides. However, Portugal just look like the team that has enough firepower going forward. Even though they didn't get the goals that they needed against Slovenia, needed to take it to penalties, they look more fluid going forward. And I think that ultimately may be the decider. Now, of course, the big call, which I don't think will happen, is if Portugal starts Cristiano Ronaldo as a striker. And that is not likely that he's going to be dropped. But if he is, I think Portugal have to be clear favorites here because you can then play a more slick passing style that can fit the players that you have. And if you need to change things up, you got Cristiano Ronaldo coming off the bench, probably hands down the best backup striker to have on any team. So it's going to be tough to see. I'm interested to see how these teams line up, though. But I think Portugal slightly based on what we've seen from them so far this tournament. Do you agree, Mac?
No. I think it's a little bit different take. I don't see a situation where Ronaldo does not start this game. So I think that's a moot point, to be honest. he was land-based on Portuguese national television. I've seen clips of that by a lot of people. Again, I don't speak Portuguese, so maybe the quotes may be incorrect. I have no idea. But I don't think if Roberto Martinez wants to keep his job after this tournament, even if they don't win the game, the quickest way to be able to lose your job is not start Ronaldo and lose the game, as we've seen based off previous management. So I think he starts. For me, the area of the pitch that I'm most focused on, and are we going to see something different out of this player, it is really a Rafael Leao. I think we're going to get a solid performance on the other wing from Bernardo Silva. I would be surprised if Portugal do not start off in a 4-2-3-1 formation, just like did against Slovenia. They had 6 shots on target. They played well enough offensively. But I argue, and my question for you, Ray, is have they played a good team thus far this tournament? I go with no. I think if we were to go off the comparison, and this may be a little bit close for home on my end, but have they faced a better team than Denmark, which England played in time? No, I don't think so. As a comparison, I think they've had one of the luckier routes thus far. So this will be the first test. So the area pitch, like I talked about, where I think is going to be they're separate off, they're going to do well, is on the other wing with Rafael Leao, because he, for me, has had a lackluster tournament thus far, where we've seen moments of brilliance, where you see everything you want from an exciting attacking player in the final third, but we haven't really seen the complete game or the finished product, that extra touch. Is that because maybe Bruno Fernandes is playing a ball too quickly? Maybe their communication is not on point, as you would anticipate what Rafael gets from his AC Milan teammates. And you can see sometimes where that Manchester United has come out, Bruno Fernandes is like, oh, I got to play this one time down the wing because we're going to lose possession right away. Chill, brother. You're playing Slovenia. You're going to get the ball back. It's fine. Let's keep the ball for a second, right? So is there that area of the pitch where they can clean up a little bit more, so they can score against a French team? I think that's going to be very, very difficult. This French defense, I would argue right now, is the best in the world. In terms of that back four, there isn't an area on the pitch where, ooh, we want to be able to get at that one player. Ooh, this player lacks pace. Ooh, this player is not strong enough. No, as of thus far, they have looked the best in the world. So I would be surprised if it's an easy test. For me, on the other end of the pitch, I think if we get even an average performance from France's attacking line, I think that they're going to have opportunities to feast against Portugal. Joao Cancelo versus Mbappe is a losing matchup for Portugal. So for me, I'm very, very worried about this because they struggled defensively against Slovenia, who had a breakaway to win the game, and they messed it up. Sesko messed it up there. So for me, if that's Mbappe, my mortgage is on the line. That's going in, right? Like there's just no situation that's not happening. So for me, again, even though I think based off our previous podcast, and both these teams didn't score from open play themselves in this last round, I've actually flipped the other way, where I think France, for me, should beat out Portugal because of how strong defensively they are. We haven't seen enough offensively from Portugal thus far for me to even really be worried about them. Could I be wrong? Yes. And I agree with you is where this is still very much a toss-up, but where I put Spain, Germany, maybe 51-49, I think this is, in terms of odds, this is like a 55-45. It's still close. But I lean France now in comparison to before. You asked me 4 days ago where I would have been Portugal.
That's fair. No, that's fair. And you brought up great points, but I just think based on sort of what we've seen, I think Portugal are closer to click at that front level, at the front line, than France, who we, of course, haven't seen done so well, of course, against an open Portuguese back line. It could be the game that clicks. However, it's going to be a game where Portugal are not bad on the ball themselves. They are one of the deepest teams themselves, and I think they have enough to go toe-to-toe with France. So it's going to be an open one, and it could go either way. So I guess we'll have to see Portugal and France.
Make one more point on that, if that's okay. I think what's going to actually be the decider in terms of those individual matchups, for me, it's going to be the Antoine Griezmann area of the pitch versus Vitinha versus Joao Palhinha in the previous matchup. Because, again, just like I throw cold water on, let's say, Rafael Leao's tournament, same thing, even Bruno Fernandes' tournament in a lot of ways. Same thing for Antoine Griezmann thus far. I haven't, even though he's been very much a tireless worker for this team, I haven't seen him in a final third aspect being a creator, being a provider. And if he gets completely walled out by this midfield, where they can't even get into the final third to let their best player show, and a lot of that is to that area of the pitch, I think a lot of the fault is going to fall on his shoulders. Where Portugal, if they block that out, then again, then at that point, I wouldn't be surprised if we're getting to the end of the game and 0-0, you have to go into extra time, and a mistake is what ends up costing either one of these teams. So it's very, very close. I agree with you. But I'm very excited for this match. But
I'm very excited.
Like I started from this beginning when we talked about these two games, I don't know how I'm going to get anything done on Friday. I'll be honest with you.
Well, lucky for me, I guess, as well. I'll be working from home as well. So I, too, will be watching these games. Regardless of what happens, we'll, of course, be here to cover what happens there. So let's take a quick break here, Mac, and then we'll be coming back to talk about the teams that have been eliminated from the tournament so far. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to Also Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now discussing the teams that have been eliminated from the round of 16 stages for this year's 2024 Euros. Of course, the teams are Italy, Slovakia, Romania, Austria, Georgia, Belgium, and Slovenia. Now, I'm going to start it off with a team that I already discussed briefly with their tie against Switzerland, and that's, of course, Italy. Previous holders, very, very disappointed in how they went out against Switzerland. Like I said, it really didn't look like they had any offensive threat going forward. And even though they had that quote unquote experience and know-how as a footballing nation and association, it did not look that way on the pitch. And having watched the game play out, even if you gave Italy another 90 minutes, I don't think they would have carved any chances against Switzerland to score any goals. And so very disappointed in how their tournament played out. Very interested to see what this means for Spalletti, who has implemented some changes, it looks like, with regards to the style that they want to play. But whether it's personnel change or it's maybe a different change in his style, I'm not exactly sure where they go from here. So Italy expected them to make it a little bit further, but again, they were dealt a tough tie against Switzerland, who have been surprising so far this tournament. They have been one of the most disappointing teams that have been on the side that has been eliminated. So definitely wanted to mention them here. Any words on Italy and or any other teams that were eliminated from this round, Mac?
Absolutely. So one for me, and this is what I think is very interesting when we're talking about these teams, how international football works. It's very much generations, cycles, be able to get through that next round. You see that upcoming crop of players coming in through. If you do miss it on one year, you don't perform well. But okay, by next tournament, we may have these players in their prime that they should be at their best. And the talks of golden generations for some teams. So for Italy, for me, am I disappointed with how they perform compared to where they are traditionally? Yes, but when I look at those names on the pitch, I don't necessarily see a whole lot of players that, here's a couple of, this is, and to do the direct comparison, it's with Belgium, who are towards the end of their generational cycle, where you don't have a Kevin De Bruyne playing at Manchester City. You don't have, at one point in his career, Lukaku playing for Manchester United or Chelsea, bagging in goals, or previous before Eden Hazard, right? For me, the top end talent for Italy has not been there. The bright side for them is when you look at their age profile, they'll okay, a couple years from now for the next World Cup, who would still be realistically on this team? Donnarumma is only 25, Barella is 27, Calafiori is 22, an upcoming defender that's been linked to Arsenal. Chiesa is 26 right now, so he should be just entering his prime footballing year. So a lot of these players will be around for the next tournament. But are they going to be at that, let's say, world-class level where they're going to be the threats to the France, to the Englands, as we've seen from Italy in previous tournaments? I don't see that. The only main player I'll argue that's going to fall off is Jorginho, so maybe they get it through time in with chemistry, because he's 32, Matteo Darmian's 34, so they'll generally fall off, those two players, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see everyone else come back. So again, even though it's like kind of a half-assed answer, I think they'll still be around, but will they be a threat? No, not for me. Whereas a team, I feel on the other side, is going to completely fall off is Belgium. and to be able to talk about that, where Kevin De Bruyne, he's 33, Lukaku's 31, Jan Vertonghen, who started games, is 37. This team is cooked. I would be surprised if we see in a World Cup they even make it out of a group stage. I understand that they're expanding the tournament where they might get more of those bummy teams in, but is this team a threat to anybody or going to be a quote-unquote dark horse going to any league tournament? No, absolutely not. This team is going to go back down to earth. Prior to Eden Hazard, Kevin De Bruyne, Lukaku, and all at certain points playing for Chelsea. Prior to then, I don't think this team is anywhere near close enough to being a threat to anybody on the world stage, right? Where, I'll be honest with you, give it a year versus Belgium, I'll probably favor Canada. Let's put it that way, okay? Just in terms of natural quality on the pitch. That's right, I said it. Am I crazy? Probably. But point being is this Belgian team right now, they are not going to be anywhere near close touching those echelons. And for me, that's the difference between them and Italy, where there's a consistent crop of at least 7 out of 10s coming out of this Italian player system, where the Belgium, they hit a couple of golden stars, but looks like they have not even come close to repeating any of that, where now going forward, it's more the 5, the 6 out of 10s, unfortunately, and that's nowhere enough if you're going to challenge some of these top teams and be a threat to some of these top teams.
Yeah, that's a great shout out. And of course, I didn't want to talk about Belgium. Just looking at their squad, like you said, they're going to be missing a couple of those big names being phased out in the next couple of years. The remaining part of the squad really reminds me of a poor man's version of the Netherlands, where they have the likes of course, Jeremy Doku. They do have Johan Bakayoko, Luis Openda, still all players still on the younger side of 25, Amadou Onana as well. But apart from that, there's no standout players, and I think they'll just have enough to qualify for the next couple tournaments. But they're definitely going to need someone to step up and be the star of this squad. And if it's any of those players that I just mentioned, I don't see it happening in the next 2 years. It could be that they have to wait a whole cycle to see that those players come through to their prime. So it definitely looks like they're going to revert to some more darker times, if I can say it that way. But they do have enough quality, I think, to just qualify for the next set of tournaments. The next team I did want to touch on briefly, of course, the team that the match that we got wrong for the round of 16 match, and that's, of course, Austria, who were very, very unlucky to have gone out against Turkey. Great job by Turkey, specifically their goalkeeper. I have to look it up. Mert Günok, of course, the Turkish goalie who made that save in the final moments of that matchup. Austria have a very interesting squad, and with Ralf Rangnick there, it looks like they have something brewing. Would not be surprised if they, of course, qualify for the World Cup and see them in the knockout stages again. They were able to match up against sides like the Netherlands and France in their group, and almost got a tie against Turkey in this round of 16. So a little bit more experience. If Ralf Rangnick is still there come the World Cup in 2 years, could be a big turnaround for this team, and I'm excited to see what happens for them there. Any word on how Austria have surprised you, Mac, this tournament?
Yeah, for me, I loved how it's the differentiation and what you can feel with Italy in some ways, and why I think that they still might be somewhat of a threat, but they won't be in the upper echelons. And I think Austria can try to implement what they do. It's really system over individual player. And with Ralf Rangnick, they have a system where it seems like not just 11 players buy into it, but the whole kind of club top to bottom from a national team perspective, buying into how we want to be able to try to play football. In the year of 2024, across families and across Euros, they only lost 2 games, one being to France, and then, of course, the game against Turkey. So, and for me, they are very competitive against the France team, not at their best, and they beat teams, even Turkey, in a friendly prior to the tournament, 6-1. So, for me, they've been one of the more up-and-comer teams where it's been system and what's done very well for them. And what I think going forward, even if they may move some players out, like an Artur Altinic, although probably won't be part of the next round of tournaments, I assume. But a lot of these other players are young, they're upcoming, they have a lot of oomph about them. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see this team grow, as well as we see certain players where, because they play so well for the national team, have been picked out and picked up by some of these larger clubs. A player like Conrad Leimer, who was unheard of, I would argue, 16 months ago at the very least, maybe even before then, where he, even though he was in the middle of his footballing prime right now, I would say he's one of the first players on the team sheet for one of the biggest clubs in the world in Bayern Munich. So for me, this is a team where you can kind of see where it's not just about individual stars, but the system showing out how they want to play progressive, attacking, total football. So I'd love to see how well they're doing it. And a little disappointed to see that they weren't able to carry on the tournament. But for me, they're one of the teams that by next World Cup or next Euros, they for me might be in that leading spot for a dark horse, where what we might have seen Belgium before in previous years. So very excited for their future.
Yeah, of course. And just, of course, to round it out, Slovakia, Romania, Georgia, and Slovenia were the remaining teams that were eliminated. Of course, they did quite well to make it so far in the tournament. And, of course, Georgia have to shout them out, their story so far, and the fact that they were able to make it out of the group stages in their first Euros. Got to give them credit. So this concludes our podcast for today, guys. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be sometime after the quarterfinals, as we preview the semifinals for the upcoming round. So, of course, we'll cover all the action from the 2024 Euros. But until then, Mac, thank you for joining us.
Peace out.
See you guys.